Exodus 15 records a song that Moses and the Israelites sang after their victory at the Red Sea. According to scholars, it might be one of the oldest texts in the Hebrew Bible. How do we know this? Well, it's a song. Sometimes it's called the Song of the Sea, and it likely preserved an early record of the Exodus story before it took its final form later on. In our King James Version of the Bible, it may be harder to detect, but if you break out this chapter into parallel lines, you can see that it forms beautiful poetry about the power of God to conquer his enemies. And this poetry would be put to music, likely with a percussion instrument or maybe a stringed instrument like a kind of harp. In fact, if you use the Book of Mormon Central Scripture Plus app to read this chapter, you'll discover that the King James text is broken out into poetic lines so that you can better appreciate the poetic artistry of this chapter. This ancient song spends a lot of time focusing on God's power and dominance, saying things like, God is my strength, he is a warrior, he drowned the Egyptians in the Red Sea. This song specifically talks about how God used his right hand to wield his superior power over the Egyptians. Thy right hand, O Lord, is become glorious in power. Thy right hand, O Lord, hath dashed in pieces the enemy. Thou stretchest out thy right hand, the earth swallowed them. Fear and dread shall fall upon them. By the greatness of thine arm shall they be as still as a stone. Now, when the Israelites crossed the Red Sea in Exodus 14, it was Moses who stretched forth his hand to bring about this miracle. This song recognizes that while Moses was God's messenger, it was really the power of God that split the sea and defeated the Egyptians. This gesture of extending the right arm occurs throughout the Old Testament, and it's often a gesture that manifests God's almighty power and even wrath. Interestingly, this gesture shows up in Egyptian records about mighty rulers executing punishment. For example, Pharaoh Thutmose III was described as a warrior of uplifted hand on the battlefield. No one can stand in his presence. When God stretched forth his hand over the Red Sea and destroyed the Egyptians, it showed in a tangible way how Israel's God was superior in might and power to the gods of Egypt, who also extended their hands. As Exodus 15 verse 11 says, "Who is like unto thee, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like thee, glorious in holiness, fearful in praises, doing wonders?" In the Book of Mormon, Nephi stretched forth his hand to display God's power immediately after he had preached to Laman and Lemuel about the miracle of the Red Sea. In 1 Nephi 17, Nephi exhorted his brothers to believe in God's power to build a ship and cross the sea. And now, if the Lord has such great power and has wrought so many miracles among the children of men, how is it that he cannot instruct me that I should build a ship? Just as Moses stretched forth his hand to part the Red Sea, Nephi stretched forth his hand to show Laman and Lemuel how God could likewise help them triumph over the sea and reach the promised land. And it came to pass that the Lord said unto me, Stretch forth thine hand again unto thy brethren, and they shall not wither before thee, but I will shock them, saith the Lord. And this will I do, that they may know that I am the Lord their God. While a simple gesture like stretching forth one's hand may seem insignificant, it subtly underscores God's power in the scriptures and can help us look for God's power in our own lives. Abinadi and Jesus Christ both stretched forth their hands in the Book of Mormon to display God's power in miraculous ways. Today, priesthood holders can stretch forth their hands and channel the power of God in administering priesthood blessings. All members of the church who participate in sacred priesthood ordinances can also behold the power of God in our hands and in our hearts, and by doing so, rest assured that God is with us.